Would love to tell you guys quick about David Garfinkel. He is known as the world's greatest copywriting coach. Of course, it's been repeated so much that I don't know if that's self-proclaimed or if the market did that first. Either way, it is true. David has written classic books on direct response advertising, such as Advertising Headlines That Make You Rich and Breakthrough Advertising. Both became instant classics that the top copywriters today still reference on a daily basis when they write. And he's also the host of the Copywriters Podcast, which is a secret weapon of mine. He always has great insights, but he bounces those insights off incredible guests as well. So David is a fan of grass-fed beef, and so he was quick to jump on with us when I floated the opportunity out to him. And today we're going to talk about how we can sell more of our farm-to-table products using direct response copy. And with that, David, thank you so much for jumping on with us. We really appreciate you. You are muted, my friend. Hey, David, you're still muted. Can you unmute? There you go.
Muted now. I'm sorry.
Great.
Yeah. Anyway, great to be here. Thank you.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, it was a little switcheroo on the links to get us started here. And I tested some things on my end too. Like, this is a normal time where I'm actually coaching people through copy, and we're also live in another group. So it's like, tech is really fun, but Rebecca helped me out. So thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Awesome. So David, before we get into the nuts and bolts a little bit, I'd like to hear a little bit how you actually got into writing copy.
Sure. Well, I've been a writer for a long time. I published my first story in the Meadow Hall Elementary PTA newsletter when I was 8. Now, for those of you who are like armchair psychologists like me, the title of the story was The $10 Billion Duck. And I think that indicated I sort of had a future in business, But anyway, I was editor of high school newspaper. I was on my college newspaper. I didn't know about copywriting. I used to truly hate advertising because I didn't understand about direct response marketing. I probably would have had a very different attitude if I'd known about it earlier. But I got into journalism. I ended up in business journalism. Big surprise. And my last job was San Francisco bureau chief for McGraw-Hill's World News System. And it was a great job, but it wasn't right for me. I mean, I found I wanted to be able to get behind things. And back then, journalists were actually trying to be objective and factual and so forth. So I spent a few years in the wilderness, and one day ran across a guy, maybe you guys are familiar with him. He's sort of old school, Gary Halbert. And I looked at this letter, and it was one of his newsletters, and I read it over and over again. I said, I don't know what this guy's doing, but this really resonates with me. I really like this. I'd like to do it myself. And it turned out about a year later, Hurricane Andrew, this was in the 90s, Hurricane Andrew hit Florida, one of the worst hurricanes in history at the time. And Gary held a seminar, which was free, but at the end you had to write a check to the Red Cross for what you thought the seminar was worth. I said, you can't beat that. So I went there. I met so many people there that, many are still friends and colleagues today. I met John Carlton, who's been a good friend of mine for a long time. And I met David Deutsch, who's a good friend. Met Ted Nicholas, who never really became a friend, but was a great teacher. And we spoke on the same stage a few times. Carl Galletti, of course, Gary. I met Gary. I think I met Bond and Kevin Halbert, but they were like knee high to a grasshopper at the time. So anyway, from there, and I met Dan Kennedy too. And from there, it was kind of an inflection point. It's like one of those intersections in history. Not just for me, but for the entrepreneurial direct response marketing community. Um, I loved it. I worked at it. I worked at it. I worked at it. And I wrote this one letter that made $40 million for a client. And, early on, here's some advice to anyone just starting out. Don't have a win that big early on, because you'll live the rest of your life trying to live up to it. And I've never done anything quite like that, but I wrote some substantial letters. I'm probably the only coach. You wouldn't call Dan Kennedy a copywriting coach, because he's really more of a marketing guru. But I'm the only guy who focuses just on copywriting who's been in over 100 different industries. I mean, this is my first meeting with the grass-fed community, but so that's 101 now. And when you go across a lot of different industries, you start to see some commonalities, and you start to learn where to look for the specific uniquenesses of the industry. Anyway, 5 or 6 years into it, people started to ask me to teach them and to coach them. And I said, okay. And I was still writing copy for another 10 years. I don't write very much copy. Most of my clients now, I guess like yours, Jared, are coaching clients. And I've done work for a really big company. For 5 years, I was a copy consultant. I would get in a call, something like this, with them every week, but where we just go over one sales letter, Agora Financial. I've done work for Dan Kennedy's group, GKIC, where I would critique sales letters for some of the members and so forth. So that's basically how it happened and where it is today.
Interesting. I love that. Okay, well, with that, let's kind of launch into some of the nuts and bolts a little bit. You and I,
Sure.
we talked about, I think maybe four ideas for questions before, knowing that each question is a book, a series, a course on its own. But
Right.
so most of us, we tend to, so we're all in an industry where it's just one niche. We're focused on probably just a handful of products. So we can take this part for granted and skip it a lot of times. But before you sit down and actually write, what is the kind of research you need to do? What is the information you need to have before you can actually successfully start fleshing out some copy?
Yeah, I've got 6 points on that, but I want to tell you start, because there's one thing or two things, one two-part thing that kind of determines everything else. And sounds like you guys have got this nailed, but maybe you don't. And I want to just tell it to you. It's what I call, well, it's the first thing you need to know is who are the right people and what is the right way to attract them. And that sounds like way too simple, but let me explain why this is so important. You get this right, and it's a pathway to riches beyond anything you can imagine. When you really get it right, get it wrong, and you're stuck in the mud. And besides everything else, I want to tell you this story. It's going to take a few minutes. It's called what I call it the tale of two marketers. It's not like the Wall Street Journal story, so don't think you've already heard it. You guys know that story. So the best of times, the worst of times, with thanks and apologies to Charles Dickens. And the best of times rolls back to 1971. Now, my friend Joe Sugarman, who I didn't actually meet until many years after this, was trying his first mail order product. He'd done some other advertising, but he'd never done any mail order. And he'd mostly been doing stuff for political candidates. And I think he had not been doing products. He'd been doing other types of advertising, but he was very enthusiastic. He was sort of a visionary. He could see where the future was going. And he was very enthusiastic about the new lower cost electronic calculators, solid state calculators that were hitting the market. And so he had an idea. He went to a manufacturer. He said, I can get these out faster than your retail. And he ended up I'll jump to the end of the story. He ended up selling more than Sears was able to sell over the same time period, because he knew, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. He raised money from investors. And here's the deal. They send him money. They would get their money back first. And then after that, he'd split the money. I think it's a pretty good deal. And so he went to a mailing list broker, and he was pretty sure that engineers and they use calculators all the time. He was pretty sure they'd go wild over calculators, but he tested 10 different direct mail lists. And after the mailing, barely an order came back from the engineers or the accountants, and he was almost out of money. And the mailing list broker sat down with Joe and went over the results, and he discovered Joe was getting orders at a much higher rate from a CEO list. And the broker said the broker would pay for postage for a new mailing, and Joe could pay him back when he had the money. Her deus ex machina, right? As you can see soon, the broker saw something no one else really did at the time, not even Joe. So Joe did a huge mailing to CEO list and nearly destroyed his own life with the landslide of orders. All told, his house was calculators, his family, child labor, filling orders and stuff. But he ended up with a $30,000 profit. And in 2022 dollars, that's close to $250,000. And the mailing list broker got a whole lot more business from Joe for years to come. Now, hindsight is 2020. So it's easy for me to sit here, 51 years later and say, well, CEOs are less conservative and more interested in saving time with a lightning fast calculator. And CEOs like to look cool by having a gizmo nobody else has, but accountants and engineers are much slower to catch on. They're more conservative. They prefer the tried and true paper spreadsheets, just fine for them, or a slide rule. Well, that's easy to figure out after the fact, but Joe didn't have that information or meat to analyze what he already found out. The only real information he had was the response rate, the numbers. The CEOs responded better than engineers and accountants. So they were the right people, and Joe's sales letter just happened to approach them in the right way. Now, here's the second story. You may want to get your Kleenex or your handkerchief out for this one. It happened this year. So one of my mentoring clients is a copywriter, had written a really good sales letter for a course creator. We'll call the course creator Bob. It's not his real name, but I've changed the name to protect the guilty. Bob insisted on doing his own Facebook ads rather than letting my client do them. And the ads were very good, but they were for a very different kind of product than the one he was selling, more like maybe a law of attraction product or a snake oil product. He was promising magic and quick results from the ads he sent to the sales letter. Now, the actual product was a 15-session course with homework after each session. That's not exactly magic, and it's not exactly quick. It's valuable, but it's hard work and it takes time. Hardly any sales. So my client, the copywriter, was getting discouraged. He'd already spent thousands of dollars with me for mentoring. So I offered to write an ad he could test as an affiliate. So he would make money and then we would split the commissions. Kind of remarkably similar, right? But I didn't even know. I just learned the Joe story last night, believe it or not. Anyway, this was because, and the reason I learned it last night was Joe Sugarman is on my podcast today. He's not, but one of his books is, and I was picking up another book and I saw this story. I said, this will be perfect for you guys. So anyway, I wrote this ad, and the ad, it did not say magic. It did not say instant results. It said, here's a course to do X and you get Y result by one of the best guys in the industry. Try a couple of sessions for free and see if it's for you. Okay. Not real razzle dazzle, pretty straightforward. My client ran the ad as an affiliate, and after 100 impressions, he sold 4 courses for Bob. And my client and I each made a few $100s in affiliate commission. But here's the thing, Bob is stubborn. Now, entrepreneurs need to be stubborn about some things. You have a good idea, you know it's good. Your friends, your family, your clergy, your golf, they're all going to tell you don't do it and you want to keep doing it. But you do need to be stubborn about some things. Data is not one of those things. You need to pay attention to the data. You need to know who. You can't turn people who don't want to buy into people who want to buy. And Bob, the course creator, was certain that the way he was selling, he was attracting the wrong people. He was attracting opportunity seekers and law of attraction type people. He should have been attracting serious business builders. He had stubbornly continued to sell out the magic and quick results promises in his ads. And right now he's underwater about $200,000 because he won't listen. He's attracting the wrong people for the wrong reason. So the moral of the story is find the right people, attract them for the right reason. And that's the first thing I look for when I'm putting together a campaign. Now, I've got like 6 other points about what I look for, but surely this must resonate with you and things you've done or seen or heard about. Yeah.
For sure. So inside our paid program, we teach that there's 6 grass-fed, grass-finished buyer types. And so there's these archetypes, and we say pick one and then start drilling down to see, which one really resonates with you, someone you can talk to, because you can only talk to one person at a time. You can only market to one person at a time. So we just kind of teach that process. What as somebody that coaches the copywriting here, what are some of those questions you ask when you're trying to dig in a little bit further to your avatar?
Well, yeah, good. I mean, one thing I ask is who's the customer? Which archetype, and what is their biggest, most urgent problem I can solve? Or maybe in your case, what is the biggest, most urgent desire I can help them fulfill? I mean, that is half the game right there. And it's not always as simple as it sounds. And just because you know that, you might not address it head on. You might need to work your way into it. Some other things about the product. There are a lot of things about the product I want to know. What sets the product apart from everything else my prospects are familiar with? In other words, what makes this product unique? I like to have a thorough features and benefits list. Benefits, particularly as they would apply to and appeal to my prospect. So just to make a point, I don't know what your 6 archetypes are, but I'm going to guess if someone likes grass-fed beef for environmental reasons, they're going to be different than someone who wants it for nutritional reasons. I mean, there may be some overlap, but different benefits are going to make different, at least different priorities. If possible, I'd like to know what has worked before and what are some educated guesses as to why. Now, this one's really important, and in some ways, it sounds like, basic 101 kindergarten stuff, but it's actually a more advanced thing. How do the prospects talk? And what language do they use when they're describing the problem the product is supposed to solve? And then, I don't know, this since there is a USDA, this might be an issue for you guys. Are there any regulatory constraints that say there are certain things you can't say or shouldn't say?
It's not so much that as it's important for us to be able to draw like what those regulations say versus how they're actually practiced by the beef industry.
Well, that's the reality. Yes,
Yeah,
of course.
so it's better for us to pull out like what those really soft lines are that big corporations are moving, and it's easier to do that than it is to worry about the other. So
Absolutely. But as long as you're aware of that, yeah, it's always how it's applied, because theory doesn't land you in court, application does, or keep you out of trouble either. Okay, so yeah, I mean, those are the basic pieces of information I'm looking for. Do you have anything else that you recommend to your people in terms of drilling down on an avatar? I mean, I could talk about that if you had some ideas. Or
So it's pretty funny because a lot of times when we're speaking to people who are in our free group and even people who are in our paid program, getting them to think in terms of what your avatar's biggest fears are, what their biggest desires are, it almost doesn't register because it's like they want dinner. And now I think it's Robert Collier says sometimes the easiest thing to do is say horse for sale. But at the same time, we're not just selling grocery store beef, right? So we're selling a premium product at a premium price. And, for a marketer, we have to justify those prices, even when we find the right audience. So it's like, what are those questions? Like, how can you get in the mind of your prospect? What's that conversation they're already having, right? So it's like, how do you dig in further? Like if you had to do this from scratch, because a lot of us are doing it from scratch, how do you dig into those questions? What are those fears? What are those desires? How do you find those out?
Well, the reality is you can only do so much with your imagination or with logic. I mean, you have to talk to people, or are there consumer groups of grass-fed beef customers, grass-fed customers? Because if there are forums, you can see what they're talking about online. I mean, it ultimately all comes out of conversation, and so either you can have the conversation or you can eavesdrop on them having a conversation. That's really how you find it out. And if you have lots of okay, here's another thing. Do any of your members have companies with customer service departments, people who call in?
There might be one or two, but it's typically not. Typically it's just local ranches that have a handful of their own customers, where they're kind of fielding those calls themselves or those emails.
Okay, well, so here's the thing. If you get those calls, the more irrational it is, the more you should pay attention to it. Because, there's this thing called the curse of knowledge. Dan and Chip Heath talked about it. They didn't actually come up with it. I just found that out a few weeks ago, but they popularized it. And it means when you know so much, a lot of questions might seem idiotic to you, but you got to understand that your customers have not spent hours and years, learning about this. They don't live with it every day. They don't have to deal with it. They don't have meetings with lawyers or ag scientists or whoever you have your meetings with, or nutritionists, so it's not just about educating people, it's finding out about what people believe in. The best way to find out what people believe is from their questions and their complaints. But this stuff comes interactively.
That was such a valuable point right there. We're trying to figure out what they believe. I don't think that's a distinguished part that I've ever pulled out before or taught, or I don't know. And it's like one of the, again, curse of knowledge. It's one of those things we hear all the time, right? As copywriters in a very direct response kind of field. But yeah, so like what your customer believes is going to determine their actions. And the way to get to that is through the questions they ask and probing them. That's very,
yeah. I mean, the other thing is you could do your own focus group. You just set up a Zoom like this and offer to send someone a few steaks or a few whatever, and say, if you'll get on and let's talk about what you feel, what you're worried about, what you're excited about, what you want to know, what you're unsure about, and record it and transcribe it, and just really think, okay, what's underneath that question, that statement, that complaint, that uncertainty.
incredible. All right, so assuming we have some of these things figured out, or at least we're sure we have enough to get started writing, direct response copy is very different than pretty much any other discipline when creating marketing and advertising. So to really increase our chances of making the sales at the volume we want, at the margin we want, at the success rate we want, what are some of the elements we need to be including in our copy?
Okay, well, I'd say there's 4 elements and that are absolutely necessary, and I thought of 5 that are optional, but may be very useful. So the four elements, and I imagine your people have heard this before, but you need an opening, which is a headline or a hook. You need benefits, and those are usually expressed as bullet points. You need an offer, and the offer is the best presentation you can make of what your customer gets, though it can sometimes be as little as a sentence or a paragraph. And you need a call to action, a clear, as foolproof as humanly possible, simple instruction on exactly what steps to do to take to buy, right? Now, the first part, the headline, that's where all the money is. 90% of the 80 to 90% of the effectiveness of any ad, any sales page, any direct mail letter, any postcard, any video sales letter is in the headline. It's in the first, sentence or two or three, because that's when people decide what this is all about and whether or not they want to keep their mind open and whether they're interested or whether they'd rather not pay attention. And it's worth it to spend time writing and rewriting a headline and coming up, using your imagination to recombine things, benefits and ideas, to come up with a better hook, a better big idea. So, those are the four basic things. The optional things are an opening story, which could be about you, might be better to be about a customer, could be about, but something that will really focus the person on, oh yeah, this sounds interesting. I want to go further with this. Some other kind of stories later on, testimonials and case studies, an origin story, what got you into grass-fed ranching, for example. People might want to know that. And a mechanism. Now, mechanisms, I don't know how well that would work in your business. You probably have a better idea about that than I do. But a mechanism is kind of a dramatic, simple to understand visualization of how something works and how it works different, how it works better. So that's it. Headline, hook, benefits, offer, call to action, pretty mandatory, and then opening story, other story, testimonials and case studies, origin story, and mechanism, all is optional.
Wow. Okay. So even just the first 4.5 or 5 that you started with, if we just did, that would be minimum effective dose. If we were to just implement that in all of our copy, every Facebook ad, every email, every landing page, we would see an increase in the number of either opt-ins or sales or clicks. And yeah, so that's pretty interesting. So those are things we teach, but you happen to be what I would call one of the foremost experts on headlines. Would you mind riffing on that a little bit, talking about how the different way we could approach a headline? I know you have an entire book on it, so.
Yeah, I mean, so you mentioned Robert Collier before, and I love Robert Collier myself. He has a saying that says, you should enter the conversation already going on in your prospect's mind. So we spent a little time talking about how do you imagine what that is, or determine it as well as you can. If a headline is too far from what they're thinking at the moment or what they think about usually, if it's too bizarre just to get attention, that's not going to work. If it gives too complete a story, that's not going to work, because if you know the whole story, then why do you need to read any further? And it's a lot easier for a prospect to say no than to say yes. Not anything against you, but simply they've got too many choices and too many decisions to make and not enough time and too many too many distractions. So a headline is best when it's intriguing and creates some curiosity, but also promises a benefit or warns about a danger. And in other words, let's call it skin in the game, right? No pun intended. I mean, if you if you look at Scientific American and you look at the headlines for their articles, my dad was a scientist, so I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about this. But science is about never having any skin in the game, being as neutral and objective as possible. So, a headline in Scientific American might be wildlife flocks migrating at faster rates than previous 3 years. Wake me up when the headline's over, as opposed to the National Enquirer, where every headline is like the most outrageous scandal or the most amazing medical miracle or the most scandalous celebrity spicy event that the world has ever seen. And obviously you want to find a point somewhere between the two, but you want to get them interested. I mean, there are I have 2 podcasts that I did in the last month or two from John Caples. I pulled 29 ways to start headlines from one chapter of his great book, Tested Advertising Methods. And a lot of headlines can be very simple. They can start with how or these, or can start out with, they can even be 1 or 2 words. But the key thing is, what does the headline do? Does it get the prospect engaged emotionally? And sometimes you're going to have to write a lot of them to boil it down, because you might end up with a very long headline and say, oh, well, Jay Abraham does that, John Carlton does that, I guess it's okay. Well, I don't even want to talk about Abraham, but Carlton, I will. I mean, his headlines, first of all, he's going to a very, very, very niche market. He'll be going to golfers or, street fighters or self-defense people. And so he's really drilling down on some tantalizing detail that's going to, make their heads explode. I mean, the thing about a headline is if the headline, oh boy, I don't know. Ask me a question. I'm stuck.
For those of you who are wondering what he's talking about, John Carlton was known for being one of the go-to copywriters for the golf niche. I like to say niche because I'm American,
Yeah.
But niche is the right term. It bothers me every time it comes out of my mouth. But he would write. So David was talking about, National Enquirer, scandalous, miraculous type headlines. John Carlton would write headlines about golf, how like a golf technique or a golf program, which would be something like how an 87-year-old one-legged midget golfer with one eye can drive the ball 450 yards with one swing or whatever. I can't remember what it is, but it's literally that nuts.
Yeah.
And so it's drilling. So maybe starting from there about how the way you raise your beef can cure different ailments or better for these types of diets, or has this flavor profile, or it's best to have it in the freezer in case of an emergency. Whatever the case is, it's starting with the sensational and then making it believable. So
that's right. That's a really good way to look at it. Start with the sensational and make it believable. Yep.
I just made that up. So
Oh,
for you.
it's a good neologism. I like it. Yeah, I have trouble with niche and niche. I was a French major, so I had to say niche, but niche just feels better. I don't know.
Yeah, but you can't say riches and niches. No one will know what you're saying.
No, nobody will know. No, that's true.
Along these terms, I didn't really have this question ahead of time, and I don't really want to put you on the spot, but I know that you will have some good ideas on this.
Okay.
So, what are some of the letters or ads that you have in your swipe file that just when you read them, you knew right away this was a great ad. I want to reference this for the rest of my life. So for those of you watching that aren't in the program, a swipe file is when you come across an ad that catches your attention, you literally swipe it and you put it in a file and reference it later. So when you're stuck on copy, it helps you with ideas. It helps you contextualize what they've done to maybe test in your business. So you're creating a file of all these different winning sales letters and ads. David, like what are some of the ads or letters you have in your swipe?
Well, there's a little ad that Gary Howe, a newspaper ad, and it said golf ball flies too far. And the idea was the golf ball flies so far that it may be made illegal in certain tournaments. Not it has been, but it might be. That one really got me. So there was a guy named Joe Carbo. I love Joe Carbo. He had a little $10 book that he sold, and he was able to make money with full page newspaper ads just selling a $10 book. And it was called The Lazy Man's Way to Riches. And there are many versions of this ad, but I always the copy, it just gets me. The way he did it so simply and so powerfully, so engagingly. You know, the Wall Street Journal ad, I was making a reference to it. It was the most profitable ad that was tracked for where sales were tracked in the history of advertising. $2 billion from like a 2-page letter. Now, the thing about it is, you know, when you also have point of purchase presence, like at every newsstand in America, you see the Wall Street Journal. If you're taking a train in, say, from Connecticut to New York, everyone on the train is reading the Wall Street, and on and on and on. In other words, it was a very good environment, let's say, in which to write a letter. But the letter was pretty extraordinary, and it starts out, you know, on a beautiful late spring day, one June 25 years ago, and it goes on to tell the story of these people at its college reunion, and there are two men. They'd both gone to college, and they both had wives and children and homes. One was the department head and one was the CEO. And what was the difference? Knowledge, information, like you get Wall Street Journal. And they never even said flat out, this guy read the Wall Street Journal and the poor schmuck who's only like a department head wasn't smart enough to read the Wall Street Journal. They never said that, but it was strongly enough implied. So those are some. It's great. It's great to read old ads, even ads I don't like. I mean, there was a guy who kind of invented what we do named Claude Hopkins back in the aughts, like 1906, 1907, in Chicago. And he wrote some brutally tough ads about the film on your teeth if you don't use toothpaste and you know, but if you read his ads, every word is machined. It's just tight, and the logic, the argument, and he's selling to millions of people, and he's taking brands from number 10 or number 15 in the marketplace to number 1. So I don't really enjoy reading his ads, but I get a lot out of them.
That's a great point. I end up quoting him quite a bit. Um, Not that it matters, but he's buried like an hour away from me. So I'm probably
Really?
gonna make that pilgrimage at some point. Yeah, in Spring Lake, Michigan.
Oh, wow. Are you in Michigan?
I am. Yep. I'm in Southwest Michigan. Our company's all over though. This is a remote company. So Rebecca's in Michigan too, but that's just happenstance.
Yeah, I have
all over.
roots in Michigan. My dad was born in Detroit, and we used to go up to Petoskey every summer. So
Oh
I know
yeah.
the state. I even know this,
Yeah, exactly. So you went somewhere up here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So absolutely. So far, if David's been talking over your head because you're not in our program, um, I would highly recommend chasing down the ads he's mentioned, the names he said, and starting there. If you're just like, I don't know where to start, write down the names, go after what he's talked about in Google, because you can actually see these ads. Maybe go to Google Images after doing a search, and you can actually see the ads he's referenced and the copywriters that he's talked about. So one of the ads I was thinking of as you were talking about the tale of two men or two investors was Dan Kennedy always talks about vitamin donuts, how there was an ad for vitamin donuts in the 60s. I was just thinking about, oh, I forgot about that one. That would be an interesting way to apply some copy to grass fed. So
That's interesting. Wow, I've never heard of that before, but that's a
the
good one.
ad's crazy. They have this, it's just a box of glazed donuts, a healthy girl on there. It's called Vitamin Donuts.
They don't have any vitamins in them. It's just the word vitamins on the box, right?
Exactly. It's just the name of a donut.
That's funny. That is very funny.
Instead of Krispy Kreme, it's vitamin. Okay. So let's kind of skip ahead here where we've taken your advice. We've applied the 4 or 5 necessary things to our copy, and we've gotten through a first draft of copy. Now, you're the guy people go to when they need their copy critiqued. Like
Yep.
A-list copywriters use to bounce ideas and all that. So how would you, after you've written copy, how would you self-critique? Like, how would you edit? Like, what's that process like, and what can we practically do once we've banged out a first draft?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. I actually have a checklist, which is available for free if you subscribe to my podcast notification. I'll go through the checklist, but if you go to garfinkelcoaching.com/podcast, GARFINKEL coaching.com/podcast, all lowercase, and sign up for an email list to find out about new podcasts, you'll get this 11-point copy checklist free. So every one of these is like the top level. You can always go down deeper, but if you can get these things right, you're going to be in better shape than 90% of everyone else. Okay. So the first one is a word I use, grabability. I think I made it up. Grabability of your copy. How does your copy reach out and grab your readers or your viewers' attention from the start and hold on tight until the close? All right. Second one is your claims. You can't sell anything without making some claims. So how unique and believable are your claims? The third thing is proof of claims. You make a claim, great. You don't prove it. Even if you know it's true, doesn't mean other people are going to believe it. So how convincing is your proof? Number 4, testimonials. How well can your target market relate to the people giving testimonials? For example, grass-fed beef. If everyone, I think he's a vegetarian, but if Tom Brady ate meat, he'd definitely have grass-fed beef. If everyone is Tom Brady level or above in your testimonials, the person going to say, well, I really like watching him play with the Buccaneers, but I'm no Tom Brady. That's not me. So, on the other hand, if you're only marketing to Super Bowl ring holders, then that might be a good idea. But you want your testimonials to resonate with your target market. Number 5, objections. How well do you anticipate and answer objections? Now, for objections, sometimes this is why it's good, even if you don't like to sell, to try to sell your product in person to somebody, not necessarily to make more sales, but to learn what real world objections are. Because in a sales letter, the only way you hear an objection is, they leave the page. I mean, occasionally people will write in with their objections, but don't count on it, right? Number 6, flow factor. How well do you develop and refresh curiosity? How effective are your subheads to keep the reader engaged? How smooth are your transitions? How well do you keep building anticipation right up to the close? 7, consistency. Are there logical or emotional inconsistencies that need to be fixed? This is like a long conversation, but if I was telling that story at the beginning and I called the guilty course creator Bob in one paragraph, and then I called him Robert in another paragraph, and then I called him Robbie in a third paragraph, and then I called him Robber, even though he's only stealing from himself, in the fourth paragraph, that's inconsistent. That would not work. That creates distrust. It creates discomfort, creates distrust. 8, rapport and empathy. I wish I could tell people how to do this. Something you learn. It takes a long time to teach people how to do this, but how well do you make your prospect feel comfortable? I mean, some people are just better at this than others, but you can work at it. How well do you make your prospect feel comfortable with the languaging and the tone of your message? Number 9, stories. How effective and intriguing are your stories? I'm about to do a podcast. I'm going to record it this week on story persuasion and the difference between dramatic stories and sales stories. And what works really well on the screen or in a novel does not work in copy. And I have to say, I don't spend a lot of time criticizing people in this community, but I'm going to make this criticism. There are a lot of people out there who read one book or saw Joseph Campbell or attended a seminar by Robert McKee, and they think that a hero's journey is going to be the right story for everything, every time you need a story and copy. And that's ridiculous. What works really well for a 5-act TV drama is not going to work really well for your sales letter. The stories are shorter and they're more about trying to illustrate how the product, what it's like in someone's real life. I mean, a hero's journey story has inner development, outer development, act 1, act 2, mentors, tricksters, villain. Oh my God. Can't do that in a sales letter. It's too much stuff. Okay. Number 10, bullet points. How much sales power does each bullet point have? And number 11, your close. How strong and appealing is your close? And of course, how clear is it? I remember way back in the day when we still had a lot of magazines. I heard about this ad, and it was like a full-page magazine ad, and it had a little coupon. And the art director thought I'd get really fancy. And so the coupon was in black with white type. So you would have to go out and find a pen with white ink in order to fill it in. How likely do you think it was that there would be sales? So, little practical things like that to think about.
That's incredible. That checklist was incredible. And it's got a broad enough margins where you really can think through each section and each draft to really dig in. Like you said, you really could dig into each one and go further and further. So that's incredible.
Thank you.
Do you, so one more time, that's Garfinkel Coaching, Finkel, Kel, not KLE, so Kel, garfinkelcoaching.com/podcast.
Podcast.
How we
And
did
then
that?
there's a sign up form. You put in your name, email, and then get a link or an email with a link to download the checklist.
Wow, incredible. Well, David, let's call that a wrap. I mean, you've given us tons of valuable information and ideas to jump into. I appreciate you hanging out with us. Guys, subscribe to the Copywriters Podcast. It's one of the few actual copywriting podcasts that cover the type of copywriting that we teach and that we recommend doing. So, and his guests are incredible. People often that I've never even heard of, but they come in with great insights, great things that you can test and try right away. And then they get to sit at David's feet while he coaches them through copy as well. So highly recommend that. Check out the 2 books, Breakthrough Advertising and Advertising.
Excuse me. Breakthrough Copywriting.
Copywriting. Advertising was the other one we were talking about.
Yeah,
earlier.
that's a great book, but it's not mine.
Yeah, right. Break. Yes, exactly. So, and then Advertising Headlines That Make You Rich. It's still one of my favorite resources that I cling to on a near daily basis. So, David, thanks for hanging out with us. We appreciate the insight that you dropped today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Have a good one. Thank you so much. See you, everybody.
Okay, bye.